It's a good sound of brothers and sisters talking to each other. It's hard to stop that. But I only have a few weeks left to get through a lot of chapters of Proverbs. We have today, next week, and the following Sunday to get through Proverbs 19 through 31, which is probably not going to happen. So we'll get through as much as we can, and then we can give a summary of some portions, and the last Sunday will be reserved for wrapping up and some additional practical application for us as Christians in 2021. Chris isn't in here, but I really appreciate him taking you through the last 3 chapters of Proverbs last week while Tess and I were out of town. We're going to pick up this morning in Proverbs chapter 19. So if you will, go ahead and open your Bibles to Proverbs chapter 19.
Which translation?
I am studying and reading out of the New American Standard. And this is, for the last few chapters, the theme has really been that contrast or the dichotomy between the upright and the wicked, the righteous and the unrighteous. And then here, we're getting a shift in the topic really to be around general conduct of ourselves. The previous chapters are practical and can be applied to your life and general conduct, but this is a little bit more specific away from that contrast as it has been for quite a few chapters, or that portion. We're the ones who made them chapters. But that portion of Proverbs. So this next portion, we're going to shift concepts a little bit. Verse 1, better is a poor person who walks in his integrity than a person who is perverse in speech and is a fool. As we've said in previous weeks studying Proverbs, a lot can be said for either the first half or the second half of the proverb by looking at the opposite half of the same proverb. So it's a lot of it's this or it's this, or it's this and it's this. And most of the time it's this or this. And you can contrast the two. And sometimes it's really blatant. It's righteous or unrighteous. And sometimes you get some like this, and we're going to actually see this a lot throughout these next few chapters, that they don't always contrast clearly, which allows us to look a little deeper and to make some inferences as to really what's being compared here. And we're going to see a lot about the poor person here in this particular chapter, this particular portion. But we see the poor person who walks in his integrity. It's a good thing, because it says better for this person who is poor to have integrity rather than any person who is perverse in speech and is a fool. And if you'd like to know what a fool is, read the previous 18 chapters, because we get to see multiple descriptions of who the fool is and the things that the foolish person does, the thoughts and the actions of the foolish person. But it's this physical state of the person, the poor person, having a mental state or spiritual state of having integrity, and then this person who is perverse in speech, which has the perversion is the spiritual or psychological portion of the person, and the speech itself is the physical side of it. And the speech is how it manifests itself. So the person who has these thoughts, the perverse person, the person whose thoughts are off course, if we go back to the imagery of the path that we're on, the path would be the one that you are walking slowly and making sure you don't stumble. The perverse person is off of that path completely, and we see how in their speech. When we say that we can judge a person's fruits, we can see how they're living. Speech is one of those things. So it's better to have integrity. Doesn't matter if we're poor or not, but as long as we have integrity, it's going to be better than if we're perverse in our speech. Verse 2. Also, it is not good for a person to be without knowledge, and one who hurries his footsteps errs. The foolishness of a person ruins his way, and his heart rages against the Lord. Wealth adds many friends, but a poor person is separated from his friend. A false witness will not go unpunished, and one who declares lies will not escape. Many will seek the favor of a generous person, and every person is a friend to him who gives gifts. All the brothers of a poor person hate him. How much more do his friends abandon him? He pursues them with words, but they are gone. One who gets wisdom loves his own soul. One who keeps understanding will find good. A false witness will not go unpunished, and one who declares lies will perish. That's the second time we've seen that same kind of pattern with this person who will not go unpunished, and the person even declares lies, the results of that. And as we have mentioned multiple times before, that when we see this repetition or we hear repetition in God's word, he's telling us, because we're human beings, we often forget what he has said, and he wants to say it multiple times so it sinks in. So don't feel like you can get away with the sin in your life. And that's really what it's saying, that if you're lying, if you are teaching anything that is contrary to what God has told us, anything contrary to his will, anything against what God has taught, that will not go unpunished. And if you lie, you cannot escape from that. Luxury is not fitting for a fool, much less for a slave to rule over princes. A person's discretion makes him slow to anger, and it is his glory to overlook an offense. We're actually, right now, Daisy's having one of her first, instances of betrayal from a friend, the trust between a friend, and we're talking about it. For those of you who don't know, Daisy's my 9-year-old, and it's really difficult for her to understand really why this friend would embarrass her, make her feel bad. And one of the first things that I thought about when I found out about it, I sat down and talked to her, and she was telling me about it. She was bawling her eyes out, and it was really difficult to hear her talk to it. And it made me mad that someone made her feel that way. But one of the things that I wanted to talk to her about is you need to talk to your friend instead of about your friend. So the first thing you need to do is to call her. You need to have a conversation. You need to let her know how you felt about it. You need to let her know that you love her and you don't want to feel this way about her. And because of that, you need to make it right. And I read this verse, and it's a really recent thing that I've experienced. And I think I've said in previous classes that I do have a short fuse, but it's something I work on a lot. It's something I pray about. It's something that I talk myself through if I start to get angry, and I try to find the logic in it and work my way through it. And it's something that I want to teach to the girls early so that they can fulfill something that is described here in the Proverbs. A person's discretion, the weighing of the results of our actions, is what will help us be slow to anger, and it's our glory to overlook an offense. And another way of overlooking an offense is forgiving people. I mean, we see in the New Testament that we're supposed to forgive because God forgives us every time we go to ask for that forgiveness. He's ready to offer that to us as long as we are willing to meet him where he has told us how we need to meet him. And so we need to be able to do that here on this earth to our brothers and sisters, to the people around us, and it's to our glory in order to do so. So God could just say, do it because I said so. But he's actually saying here that it is to our benefit to do so. It's to our glory to overlook an offense, to forgive other people. And he tells us this because, again, he created us and he created our nature. And he knows how difficult it is for us to do this thing. And so he incentivizes us, really, by his own grace, by his own nature, to give us, to say that it will be to our glory in order to do this thing. It's not just a matter of doing it because he said so. It's a matter of, which we would, and he could do that, and we should do it just because he says to do it. But just some encouragement on your own journeys, when you are dealing with other people who make you angry, to think through the consequences and to practice what it's like to respond to those things that do make us angry, especially other people, and to work on being slow to anger and to overlook the offenses of others and to forgive others. A king's wrath is like the roaring of a lion, but his favor is like dew on the grass. A foolish son is destruction to his father, and the quarrels of a wife are a constant dripping. House and wealth are an inheritance from fathers, but a prudent wife is from the Lord. That's another one that if you look at the contrast or the dichotomy between those two things, house and wealth, those are all things that we want, that we think about as like, that's success. If we have this nice house or we have this money that comes to us, and it says here in this instance from a father, and it's looking at an inheritance, but a prudent wife. Now, you have to think that this is a good thing. You know, earlier I said it's like this or this. This is a good thing, but this is from the Lord. You think about, this is from man. We get our paychecks, yes, by the grace of God allowing us to be able to have the physical ability to work, but the actual exchange of money is from our employer, or it could be an inheritance left by another human being. That the house that we have, the money that we get, it's from our earthly relationships, however it works out. But what does God have the ability to give us? And it's this, in this instance, a prudent wife. And so how much better is a prudent wife than all the earthly gain that you can have? And so those of us who are married, we should be especially thankful that God has granted us this gift. And those of you who are not yet married, or those of you who've had the opportunity to be and no longer have that opportunity, those who are widowed, you know what that gift was like. And those who are not yet married, the opportunity to have that gift. Verse 15, laziness casts one into a deep sleep, and a lazy person will suffer hunger. One who keeps the commandment keeps his soul, but one who is careless of conduct will die. Could be physical, but definitely spiritual. And knowing how the relationship of the Proverbs are set up, this is a spiritual context. You're talking about keeping the soul. It doesn't say one who keeps the commandment will keep his body, but one who keeps the commandment will keep his soul. You will not lose your soul to the spiritual death that is a potential consequence. But if you're careless, I mean, not just... a lot of times when we think about carelessness, we think about being maybe accident prone or not careful, but careless, not having the care at all, absent of care of the commandment, then you will, your conduct will lead you to the spiritual death. We would much rather keep our soul, would much rather be alive, and so in order to do that, we have to keep the commandment of the Lord. One who is gracious to a poor person lends to the Lord. So think about that the next time that you're trying to judge what's this person going to do with the money. I don't know. It's not up to, we have to be good stewards of God's money. We have to be wise in what we do with the money that God's given us. But here in the Proverbs, we read this book of wisdom. A gracious person, one who's gracious to a poor person, doesn't just lend to that person, but lends to the Lord. There are people who are truly in need, and you may be the only person who is able to help that person, and think of the message you can send to that person. I drive through Atlanta all the time, and when I'm able to, sometimes I don't have money with me, but I usually have a bottle of water or something to hand something out. And sometimes they say, God bless you, and I say, oh, and you too, I wish you the best of luck. And whatever your circumstance is. And of course, there are people who take advantage of others through that type of interaction. But you know what? I don't want to chance it. And so I would rather take this opportunity to lend to the Lord rather than not. Because the Lord will repay him for his good deed. Again, think about why we're even having to hear that. God could just say, I'm your father, I created you, and because I created you, you have to be gracious to the poor. Okay, well, I have to do what you say because you created us. But here, there's an incentive to it. And we should there's no reason why we shouldn't engage with that incentive. We should do it out of love already, but for many people who are developing that spiritual maturity, they don't necessarily make the decisions based on love, out of God, the fear and the love that we have for God. And so if you don't have that spiritual maturity, or if we don't have that spiritual maturity, whatever the situation we're in, when God tells us what these incentives are, it's a step for those who are, I mean, even if you are mature, why not receive the blessing from the Lord by being gracious to the poor? But if you're not there, then that can help you take a step in the right direction to begin to build that maturity. Verse 18, discipline your son while there is hope, and do not desire his death. I mean, the first part makes a whole lot of sense to us. And I feel like the second part is pretty easy. But maybe I haven't been in the situation where there isn't hope. He's sitting right beside you. Absolutely. But he's going to do it anyway. Yeah.
I told him to play in the backyard, don't go in the front yard. But what does he do? He starts running toward the road. And so there's that punishment that he got because he didn't stay in the backyard. You know what he didn't do anymore? He didn't run toward the road.
Yeah.
So when your child is young, you've got to teach them then because when they get older, they may not listen.
And I think it's interesting how we have this recorded for us today in God's Word, is that it doesn't say while they're young, but that's that inference that we get, because that important part there is while there's hope. And that hope begins the day that you realize that you're responsible for raising a human being, that you're raising a soul. And so while there's that time period of hope, you have to do what you can with that child. And so in this particular instance, it just says, do not desire his death. But the inference is that there is if you don't, then they won't learn the consequences, whether it's playing out in the front yard and getting close to the road and the potential danger that comes with that, or the myriad of spiritual dangers there are that face all of us. Papa?
I had the opportunity to attend the funeral of a good friend of mine, a preacher, whose son was doing the eulogy. He said the proverb says the man who loves his son chases him properly. My daddy must have loved me very much.
That's funny. I think a lot of us can probably say that. Verse 19. A person of great anger will suffer the penalty, for if you rescue him, you will only have to do it again. Listen to advice and accept discipline, so that you may be wise the rest of your days. This is one of the first time, even though we've seen this concept a lot, week after week of receiving a rebuke. Here it's said as to listen to advice. That's the instruction piece. We heard the instruction piece week after week. And accept discipline. That's the rebuke. That's the someone telling you, get back on track. Someone telling you there is a standard you need to be following and you're not following it. And so wake up and get back on track. And this is not one of those that's incentivized. This is one that is you need to do it. And God's telling us that because it's difficult for us. And we've said this before, but it bears repeating because God chose include this in the word that we have today. And if he's repeated it so many times, then I'm just repeating his words. But it's hard for us to listen to other people tell us how to live our lives. And a lot of times our pride gets in the way and we don't want to listen to that. But when we are humble and we are doing what God says in this moment, to accept the discipline, to accept the rebuke, it's only going to help us increase our wisdom to live our lives better. And this one specifically says, so that you may be wise the rest of your days. If you start now, the work that I do deals a lot in strategy, and a lot of people, they just react in their jobs. It's whatever's in their face right there in that moment. And strategy is all about planning for the future. It's almost like a little bit of prediction of the future, if you can, to plan for what the possibilities will be. And it's building these long-term plans that will benefit you in the future. And a lot of people don't get that because they're just thinking about the last person who complained, or the problem that they had with the financial piece or the performance piece or whatever it is. And here recently had an instance where we had some resources that had fallen into disrepair years ago and had been seeking funding to get them repaired a long time ago, because we saw through all the data that we had collected on these resources that they were not going to be usable in a few years. And we kept being denied the funding of, well, we'll fix it when it breaks. Well, you can't fix these particular things when they break, because it takes years to fix them, to get them into the state they need to be. Otherwise, you've got to hire a whole lot of people to do the work all at once. It's going to cost more because you aren't going to have enough time to source the parts, all this type of stuff. A lot of people don't understand the strategy. And so in these meetings, I now get a chance to say, I told you so, which is always fun. And then, because they have to be fixed now and there's not enough time to do it. And so I just tell people in these meetings, the best time to start a project that has to be done in 5 years is right now. Because a 5-year project has to be started right now if you want it done in 5 years. And that's just a practical example of, if we would like to be wise the rest of our days, if we want to live a life with a guilt-free conscience, if we want to live a life that will end up with us in heaven with God and Jesus and all the other saints, then we have to listen to advice and accept discipline when it's provided to us. And that's the best time to start is right now. And the next time it needs to be done, and the next time it needs to be done. Anytime we need course corrected, whether it's by studying God's word and being self-aware that we need to get back on track, or whether it's by another human being who is wiser than we are, who comes along and recognizes by our fruits, by the physical manifestation of our spiritual problems, that we need to get back on track. It's wise to listen to them, and it will benefit us for the rest of our lives. Many plans are in a person's heart, but the advice of the Lord will stand. What is desirable in a person is his kindness, and it is better to be a poor person than a liar. I guess there's a lot of benefit that could be made from lying, a lot of money that could be made from lying, and so I'd rather focus more on the integrity, as we saw at the beginning of this section of Proverbs, rather than the potential to earn money. The fear of the Lord leads to life, so that one may sleep satisfied, untouched by evil. How does that sound? To sleep satisfied, untouched by evil? Well, if you would like that, then all you have to do is exchange fear of the Lord. The lazy one buries his hand in the dish, but will not even bring it back to his mouth. Strike a scoffer, and the naive may become clever, but rebuke one who has understanding, and he will gain knowledge. He who assaults his father and drives his mother away is a shameful and disgraceful son. Stop listening, my son, to discipline, and you will stray from the words of knowledge. A worthless witness makes a mockery of justice, and the mouth of the wicked swallows wrongdoing. Judgments are prepared for scoffers, and beatings for the backs of fools. Any thoughts before we go to the next chapter? All right, let's go to chapter 20. Wine is a mocker, intoxicating drink a brawler, and whoever is intoxicated by it is not wise. Now, this is poetic language because wine can't actually mock, and intoxicating drink can't actually brawl. But it's talking about what the result is of. Not even just these drinks existing, but the interaction of the drink, what it could lead to. And it says clearly here that whoever is intoxicated by it is not wise. And if the theme of this entire book is about how we gain and keep and grow in wisdom, then here is one thing that can pull you away from that goal. So if you're having a discussion with somebody or something that you yourself are thinking about, did you raise your hand, Tom? Oh, sorry. To make a comment, not like, yes, that's me, sorry. Then this is something that you can go back to and meditate on, something that you can read to yourself. Focus on. Verse 2, the terror of a king is like the roaring of a lion. One who provokes him to anger forfeits his own life. Avoiding strife is an honor for a person, but any fool will quarrel. So think about that the next time you want to argue with someone for the sake of arguing. That perhaps you might be a fool. And instead, avoid the strife altogether, and that will be an honor for you. The lazy one does not plow after the autumn, so he begs during the harvest and has nothing. A plan in the heart of a person is like deep water, but a person of understanding draws it out. So it's one thing to have plans, goals, dreams, whatever they might be. It's another thing to act on those things. Many a person proclaims his own loyalty, but who can find a trustworthy person? A righteous person who walks in his integrity, how blessed are his sons after him. A king who sits on the throne of justice disperses all evil with his eyes. Who can say, I've cleansed my heart, I am pure from sin? Differing weights and differing measures, both of them are abominable to the Lord. It is by his deeds that a boy distinguishes himself if his conduct is pure and right. So thinking about this concept of conduct is pure and right, and then going back a few verses to verse 9. Who can say, I have cleansed my heart, I am pure from sin? Those are chronological. That one, I can't remember which Sunday it was when we were talking about that book, Atomic Habits. It's all about how your thoughts become actions, your actions become behavior, behavior becomes identity. And who you want to be, or who you want to be known as, who you want your... I read an article the other day about Warren Buffett, and it's like the 3 things he uses every time he makes his 3 guiding decisions or whatever. And one of them was, what will my children think about this after I'm gone? And you could think, what will if my grandchildren found this out about me, or if they knew this about my decision making, what lasting impact would that have on them? Whatever creates that emotional connection to you about identity, who you want to be known as among your brothers and sisters in Christ, who you want to be known as to your children or your grandchildren, to your parents, to your siblings, to your coworkers, whatever it is that you want people to think about you. You have to think, what are the steps it's going to take for me to achieve that identity? And regardless of whatever we use to create that identity here on earth, there's our true identity that God understands, no matter what we try to cultivate for ourselves here. And in order to have that identity, you have to behave that way over and over and over again for people to say, yes, this person is reliable. That's one of those things, he's always going to be there for me. Or that person is fill in the blank. You have to do those things in order to build that identity. And then in order to behave that way, you have to, even small actions, Okay, well, if I'm going to be reliable, we'll choose that one as our example. I'm always going to be there to help. Then I'm going to have to make sure my gas tank is filled up regularly. I'm going to have to make sure that I actually wake up when my alarm goes off. I'm going to have to make sure that I leave in enough time that even if the train's coming across the track, I'm not going to be super late. For example. Or traffic. That's at work we always say, oh, well, traffic was really bad this morning. Well, you should always leave 30 minutes earlier just to account for traffic. That's a conversation we have. Those little actions create the behavior, creates the identity. But they won't even be actions if they don't begin with thoughts. And when we read the Bible, we read this, what's in our heart, and that can be equated to how we think. What is actually going through our heads when we are making decisions, whether it's impulse, and you can tame impulse, or whether it is calculated decisions that we're making. Here, I have cleansed my heart. So I started with just my thoughts. What am I meditating on? What are the things that I'm filling my head with? And how is what I'm filling my head with impacting the thoughts that I have, what I dwell on, the actions that I make, the behavior that I have, and the person that I am and others know me to be? Because if we cleanse our hearts, if we take the time and the effort and the self-awareness, that's a big portion of it. A lot of times we say, oh yeah, I'm fine. But if someone else, if Jesus were to evaluate the same things that you're evaluating, and you have signed off on the quality control check that you say, yes, I am good. And if Jesus were to go back and do the same quality control check on your life, would he also sign off on it? I mean, that's kind of an easy way to put it. If you said, yes, I've cleaned my room, that's a common thing and I go check under Lily's pillow, and for whatever, that can't be comfortable. You cannot put this much stuff under a pillow and sleep well at night. This makes no sense. It's not even a good place to hide stuff. Like, put it under clothes in your drawer, stick it under your bed where I don't feel like getting down and looking. Like your pillow is just lifted up and it's a bunch of junk. I know I have to go back and check behind her. So if you are saying that your heart has been cleansed, if Jesus were to go back and check behind you, would he agree with you? Would he agree with your evaluation? But if we do, then the result is that we will be pure and free from sin, because the heart will lead to the identity. And where we left off talking about the conduct is pure and right. That's the action, the behavior. Verse 12. The hearing ear and the seeing eye, the Lord has made both of them. Do not love sleep, or you will become poor. Open your eyes, and you will be satisfied with food. Bad, says the buyer, but when he goes his way, then he boasts. There is gold in an abundance of jewels, but lips of knowledge are a more precious thing. Take his garment when he becomes guarantor for a stranger, and for foreigners sees a pledge from him. Bread obtained by a lie is sweet to a person, but afterward his mouth will be filled with gravel. Prepare plans by consultation, and make war by wise guidance. One who goes about as a slanderer reveals secrets. Therefore do not associate with a gossip. It's better to talk to the person than about a person. He who curses his father or his mother, his lamp will go out in time of darkness. An inheritance gained in a hurry at the beginning will not be blessed in the end. Do not say, I will repay evil. Wait for the Lord, and he will save you. And we see this multiple times throughout the Bible, that it is not our job to repay evil. It's not our job to take vengeance. That's God's job. Differing weights are an abomination to the Lord, and a false scale is not good. We see a lot about deception in these two portions of Proverbs that we've read. We see a lot about lying and deception, and that even if it's something so small as you're in a shop and someone tries to cheat you out of an extra few cents, even something that little, that type of deception is an abomination to the Lord. someone owes you some money and you're like, you know what, I'll round it up to whatever because it'd be better to have an extra $15. And in the end, I let them borrow whatever, hundreds of dollars. And I'll just go ahead and round it up. That's essentially a false scale. I mean, we need to examine all aspects of our life and every opportunity that we have to do the right thing and choose the right thing. A man's steps are ordained by the Lord. How then can a person understand his way? It is a trap for a person to say carelessly, "It is holy," and after the vows to make inquiry. A wise king scatters the wicked and drives a threshing wheel over them. The spirit of a person is the lamp of the Lord, searching all the innermost parts of his being. Loyalty and truth watch over the king, and he upholds his throne by loyalty. The glory of young men is their strength, and the honor of old men is their gray hair. Bruising wounds clean away evil, and blows cleanse the innermost parts. Any thoughts there before we move on?
The Bible says very much, especially in our Proverbs, about just weights. Of course, that carries over in any exchange we have with people. We're selling them something deceitfully. They're valued with the same principle.
Yeah, absolutely.
I read one time when a person worked in this grocery store, the lady came in and asked to buy chicken. Didn't have but one chicken left, so he put it on the weights. He said, "That's my chicken, but I'd like to have one a little heavier than that." So he selected through the ice and put it back on the scale, and pushed on the scale with his hand, and made it weigh more. He said, "Is that heavy enough?" He said, "Yes, I'll take both of those chickens."
It's a good way of discerning. All right, verse 1 of chapter 21. The king's heart is like channels of water in the hand of the Lord. He turns it wherever he pleases. Every person's way is right in his own eyes, but the Lord examines the hearts. That goes back to how we're examining our own. Yes, we can say that we're fine, but God is going to go back behind us and examine our hearts as well. To do righteousness and justice is preferred by the Lord more than sacrifice. This verse, as I was studying, this stuck out to me more than anything. And I kind of just want to open it up and get your thoughts on it, but think about this. Think about all the studying that you've done on your own in the Bible, every sermon you've listened to, every Bible class you've been in. How important is sacrifice to God? Yeah, and honestly, that you don't have to say anything else. It is very important. The Jews lived and died by making sure they were sacrificing appropriately to God when they were doing what they were supposed to be doing. We read in the New Testament how important it is for us to not make not to make the same type of blood offering sacrifices as were made in the Old Testament, but there's sacrifice of our time, sacrifice of our the desires that are precious to us but are not in alignment with God's will. But just focusing on what we know about God's nature in the Old Testament as we're studying Proverbs and learning more about God's nature, sacrifice is over and over and over and over, and a lot of weight placed on it. And here we read, to do righteousness and justice is preferred by the Lord more than sacrifice. So what do you make of that?
When King Saul came back from defeating the Amalekites, Samuel was dispatched to confront him about his error, because God had said to utterly destroy the Amalekites. But he saved Agag, the king, and the best of the sheep and the oxen to sacrifice to the Lord, he said. And that's when Samuel confronted him with this very principle. Now, does the Lord have as much delight in burnt offering as he does in obeying the voice of the Lord? To obey is better than sacrifice. Stubbornness is a witchcraft. I mean, he's just being stubborn, just doing what he wanted to do. God was very clear
excellent example, and it illustrates the point very clearly. It's God expects us to comply, to obey. Comply is probably not even the right word, because comply is almost blindly.
Submit.
Submit to.
Well, that is worship.
Yeah.
If you look at the case of Saul, he was rejected because he rejected the word of the Lord. But to substitute worshiping God or doing what God said is foolish.
Yeah.
Because the whole point in worship is to remind us we are to be submissive to God.
Right.
And if you're not going to be, then you're wasting your time worshiping anyway.
Yeah. Any other thoughts on that?
What Jeremiah said.
You can share that one too. So that's something to keep in mind, also for your own personal reflection and study and meditation on what God expects out of us. Is that we should be focusing on doing righteousness and justice. And it's important to note here that obviously, just with these few verses we read, that justice and vengeance are different things. We're told here to do justice. However, we just read how vengeance is, we are not to repay evil.
I was going to say you need to be careful what the justice is that somebody might be thinking.
Yeah.
Because it may not be good justice, but within themselves, they think it is.
Exactly. It's
I went through that point back in '06, and my justice was wrong and would have been very bad, but it didn't happen, thank God, because God intervened in His way to stop it.
Yeah, it's justice according to His will, and the only way that we can know what that is.
It wasn't His will for me to do that day,
Right.
but you need to be careful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Study to understand His will
Right.
and what His standard is, and then that wisdom will build the likelihood of us to follow it.
Right.
We're continuing to trample that path, so that path is easier to follow.
Right. You go back to 2029, which is one that I really tried, that was a big part of my life back when I was younger.
If you will, just one moment while Terry finishes his thought. 1 second, please.
I thought I